Great. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's still good morning. Thank you for your patience. A couple of technical hitches we had to deal with, and very pleased to have so many of you joining us this morning. Welcome to the next in our Rethinking Wales sessions. My name's Oriel Miller. I'm the director of the IWA, the Institute of Welsh Affairs. We're Wales's leading independent think tank with a long track record of shaping debates and influencing change in Wales through policy and advocacy. Our online and print publications, this is the latest copy of the Welsh Agenda. The next one is literally, we're pressing send on it later on this afternoon, hopefully. And they provide platforms for robust comment and debate and our agenda setting events as well. We're a membership organisation with members across the country and much further afield too. We're funded by our members, the events that we run ourselves, and independent trusts and foundations. This is our fifth Rethinking Wales panel discussion. We're running them every Thursday at 11 o'clock. Next week, we'll be having a well-earned break, and we know many of you will be off on half term as well. And Rethinking Wales will return on the 4th of June. For those who haven't joined us before, and hopefully there will be some newcomers to the field today, we started this series of discussions to shine a light on what matters most to people now in this, our new reality, and to start to look further ahead than the immediate crisis. We are deliberately bringing people together across policy boundaries and sectors because we're not able to meet up in person. Before we get started, I'd like to talk a little bit about the changes that are all around us to help us frame the conversation afterwards. If we accept that these changes can be broken down into novel changes, things that have happened for the first time now because of COVID-19, changes that are evolutionary, that are changing still but aren't yet where we want them to be just yet, and visionary changes, how we want the future to look, but which isn't yet apparent how we're going to get there. What do these sorts of changes look like for you? Do we have a shared vision yet about the good stuff that we want to keep? Today we're going to be focusing on the future of Welsh towns. One thing that the current situation in which we find ourselves has highlighted is the importance of where we live, where we get our food, and where we access our local services. For better or worse, lockdown has meant most of us getting to know our immediate surroundings far, far better than we may have done before. We may be noticing for the very first time how much we have on our doorstep, or noticing what our places are missing. In Wales, our place is very, very likely to be a town. Around 40% of our population live in small towns of fewer than 20,000 people, and nearly everybody identifies emotionally with a town in some way. Towns are vital to environmental, economic, social and cultural well-being in Wales. So what effect could COVID-19 have on our towns? Research by Tortoise Media has found that 43% of Welsh towns are in the 10th of UK towns deemed most at risk economically. Of the 20 towns most at risk, 3 are in North Wales, listed as Colwyn Bay, Pwllheli and Porthmadog, and Tywyn and Dolgellau. And over the past decades, we've already seen many towns struggling in the wake of declining retail sales and changes in the way we rely on our town centres. But against this backdrop, we have seen other towns begin to thrive through community coordination and leadership, new initiatives and investment in local and small businesses. It would be naive not to assume that the upcoming recession could put some of that progress at risk and further harm already struggling places. The way we perceive our communities, our places and our country is formed by what we see around us and the stories we tell ourselves about our place, our past, our present and our future. At the IWA, we believe in taking an asset-based approach to our places. We should tell stories which show people what they have, not focus on what they lack. This will help those people most likely to solve the challenges they will face after COVID-19, the doers that all of us have in our communities. So we're playing our part in helping people better understand their place using our Understanding Welsh Places project, funded by the Carnegie UK Trust. And the Welsh Government has also funded the website. Understanding Welsh Places is a bilingual website that presents information on the economy, demographic makeup and local services of more than 300 places in Wales in a quick and easy format so that anybody can access and understand data about their place without having to be a data geek. The data has also been used to classify each town on a scale ranging from independent to dependent, looking at economic and social factors such as reliance on a particular sector for jobs and the distances that residents travel to work. So that means we can see if an area is reliant on neighbouring places or if they're much more independent. It also categorises places by what they have in common. And we hope that the community activists that we know are making a difference right now across Wales will use it to find places facing similar challenges to themselves and find bright ideas in places they might not expect. Understanding Welsh places also helps bridge the data gap around towns, and this will in turn inform and influence the development of policies which will help the areas where so many of us live. We've seen a shift in thinking towards a more place-based approach to regeneration and investment. And the first question to ask is, where should place-based policy be made and by whom? Part of the charm and richness of our nation is how diverse our places and communities are. From the most deeply rural parts of Wales with economies built around agriculture and high quality Welsh produce, to beautiful coastal towns with economies driven by tourism, to our historic market towns, which are often still the centre of the hustle and bustle of trade and community in our counties. But this means that getting policy right at a national level can be difficult. One size does very definitely not fit all. And we should avoid trying to tailor policies to challenges we don't understand in places we've never been, not without, at the very least, ensuring local people are able to engage meaningfully with those discussions and decisions. So the next step is to ask, what should place-based policy look like in practice? What should we be talking about? Public transport, public services, public spaces, high streets, digital infrastructure? We're going to hear from our panellists in a moment, but we also want to hear from you in our chat room and on Twitter using the hashtag Rethinking Wales. As ever, we are using these sessions as a starting point to develop long-term policy ideas for post-COVID-19 Wales. Delighted to have so many of you joining us this morning. A little bit of housekeeping before we get going. You'll have noticed that you've been muted by our IWA team technical lead, Ellen, and we're going to use the sidebar chat for questions. To ask your questions to the panel, please use the sidebar to send the moderator a question so that it says to moderator. Please remember, all chat questions are recorded and all chat discussions too. We're going to be keeping to just after midday, just over an hour, but keeping the chat room open so that you can continue to connect with each other. Great. On our panel today, very pleased indeed to welcome Adrian Emmett, who's from the Treorchy Chamber of Trade and who led the campaign that won Treorchy Champion of the Great British High Street in 2019. Welcome, Adrian. We've also got Ian Price, who's Director of the CBI in Wales, and Dr. Roisin Willmott, Director of Wales and Northern Ireland at the Royal Town Planning Institute. Welcome to you all. We've been asking people on these conversations the same broad questions to get us going. So in the current climate and in the current situation, what does Wales need to be thinking about in the long term when it comes to our towns? What are the immediate problems that we face? But also, let's get creative. What do you think might be possible now that previously wasn't? Adrian, we wanted in particular to start with a real place first and not from a policy perspective. Can you tell us please about Treorchy's experience so far and what you're thinking about for the future?
Okay, so good morning. My name's Adrian. I'm from the Treorchy Chamber of Trade. So if I give you a brief background on Treorchy becoming the champion high street and then my opinion on the future of Welsh towns.
Great.
If you don't know it, Treorchy, home to 6,000 people, top of the Rhondda Valley. Now there's plenty of challenges in the valleys. We were once the coal capital of the world. You know, with the loss of the heavy industry, we've become a left behind place, and at one point one of the poorest regions in Europe. But from our point of view, out of adversity, you know, we had to adapt and evolve, and out of adversity became an entrepreneurial and creative mindset. So the jobs are not here, so we had to create them ourselves. Treorchy has now got a vibrant and unique high street, 80% independent businesses. It's about a 96% occupancy rate, and the majority of businesses are owned by women as well. Our success has come from the established businesses that have been there about 25 years. And we've had about 25 new businesses open in the last 3 years as well. So there's a real momentum in the town. Treorchy is more than just retail. It's about experience. We've created a real sticky street so that, you know, people, they stay for longer and they want to return as well. So a little under 2 years ago, I became chair of the Chamber of Trade in Treorchy. It was no dissimilar to any other Chamber of Trade, was sort of just was there. You know, we'd been there for about 16 years, had about 30 members. And so now, 2 years later, we've got about 120 proactive members, sort of working together, you know, working smarter and sharing resources with a common goal. We've launched the Visit Treorchy brand with a website, social media sites, quarterly town booklet. We've established the first business improvement district in Treorchy that went live in April. And we were successfully chosen out of 2 out of every town in the UK to become, by the Carnegie UK, to become part of the Talk of the Town project, which you attended. And that was in February just gone. And that's going to be launching a much larger storytelling project as well then. So that's about, you know, connecting communities and celebrating our heritage through storytelling. So I think the regeneration has been driven by community-minded entrepreneurs in partnership with the local authority and supported by the local community. So it's been very much a bottom-up approach. Who knows better what a town wants than the people that's actually in that town? But they can't do it alone. They've got to partner with other people. So in Treorchy, we're very good at connecting communities. So we've got, the business community really engages with schools, with hospitals, the police, the fire brigade, the local fire station, for example. They put up our street bunting. When the judges came for the High Street Award, they put up our Christmas trees at Christmas time. In partnership with businesses, they run the town firework display. And that's just one aspect of how we partner with the community as a large. We organise street cleanups, and this increases a sense of pride and ownership and community as well. So we're a very creative community, and we're good at putting on events. So last year we held the second Rhondda Arts Festival and the first Rhondda Pride in Treorchy. My favourite event by far is the Christmas parade, and that's grown from a small lantern parade into something Disney we're proud of now. And our Christmas shop window competition is fierce. You have to come and see it. And if it wasn't for lockdown, we would have done the first Treorchy Day this year, which we were going to celebrate winning the Champion High Street. And we're doing the first Treorchy Food Festival as well. So we're very proactive in putting things on, and we're also very good at telling our story and promoting ourselves, especially digitally. So with photographs, we always have photographers at our events. There's lots of videos. So we're good at telling our story. And I think our events are key at building a sense of place and a sense of belonging as well, and pride in your local town. So that's Treorchy. The question, what are the immediate problems that face Wales? We could talk all day about this, but I think the main thing for me is, from a high street point of view, is the survival of small and independent businesses. How are they going to manage social distancing with the physical space in small shops, no head office support with training facilities, and just knowing how to do things, or even just a support network of, picking up a phone and, asking someone, am I okay doing this? How do I do this? Margins are tight, so can they generate enough income to survive? Lockdown, if anything, was the easy part. It's life after lockdown is going to be the tough part of a small business. And it's building customer confidence as well is a key factor. They've learned new habits now. They've shopped online. They've done, how long will it take them to come back to a physical shop? How long will it take them to come back to the high street? And then, what does Wales need to think about in the long term? I'm very passionate about this. Successful businesses breed successful communities, and we need to come together as a digital community. I think, we need to digitize high streets, digitize town centres to help small businesses not only survive, but thrive. COVID-19 is really shaking things up, and we need to adapt. We've got to be creative, and we've got to come together. Wales have had the Champion High Street of Great Britain for 2 years running. why can't we lead the way in how high streets are regenerated? Why can't we lead the way in digitising town centres? So that's me. Thank you for listening, and I'll take some questions if you got them.
Great. We'll come back for questions in a minute, Adrian. We're going to go to Ian next. Some really good challenges there. Ian, your members from a CBI perspective bring a different lens to things as well. Adrian's very much talking from the ground up and SMEs. What about for you? Key issues at the moment, in particular in relation to towns, and the challenges and opportunities for the future?
It's undeniable what's happening at the moment, having a huge impact. But interestingly, the changes to towns were coming anyway. I think people were starting to look differently at how our towns look, how our towns feel. I agree with a lot of what Adrian said already. I think we need to make our towns a destination in future rather than rely solely on retail. And I think people are going to come, we want them to stay, we want them to be attractive places for people to spend time. And I think as well, as a result of this, people aren't going to be as keen for quite a long time to travel long distances. So people are going to be looking for entertainment and solutions closer to home. So this is a real opportunity for towns to develop into destination locations for people in the locality. People are going to want to walk. There's a complete lack of trust and faith in public transport at the moment. Now, that's not anybody's fault, but quite clearly I'm hearing on a regular basis from people now, they just don't want to get on a bus. Sorry, I understand my audio isn't brilliant, is it? So I've turned my video off. Okay, and yeah, people genuinely don't want to travel a long distance at the moment. And I think what's going to happen as well is that what you're going to find is more and more people are going to work from home. So that's going to be to the benefit of small local regional towns, because I imagine a lot of the people that live in Treorchy actually work in Cardiff. So Cardiff has got some big office developments with thousands of people working in them now. And I think what we're hearing is that there's no intention for some of these offices to open anytime soon. So these people will remain working from home. And interestingly, they'll be looking, as things are relaxed, for communities to spend time in when they're not actually at work. So they won't be rushing off to Cardiff, or they won't be rushing off to Swansea or Newport. They'll actually be looking at their local towns. So there will be some real opportunities there. I think there's a massive piece of work to be done around gaining people's confidence. I think at the moment people are very nervous. They don't particularly like leaving home. I've seen some of the local traders where I live being very innovative around click and collect and various other methods. So you're getting people there, but they're not browsing or spending huge times in some of the retail outlets or some of the hospitality locations, but they're coming and collecting. But if you make the public spaces places where people would enjoy spending time, I think there are opportunities there. I was on a conversation yesterday where people were talking about looking at relaxing licensing laws, because obviously in a lot of these towns the public houses are part of the community and very much a hub for a lot of people, but obviously people aren't going to want to rush into public houses and stand close to someone else. So how we develop outside spaces. I appreciate we've got climate issues in Wales that probably they don't have on the continent, but how can we make these areas slightly more welcoming and where people can come and socialise and can spend time? So there are lots of challenges going forward. I think in truth, there aren't many positives to come out of what's happening at the moment, but I think this is a real opportunity to revive local towns, because I think some of the behaviours that people are going to change as a consequence of this mean that people are going to stay local. They're less inclined to travel long distances. So we'll see what happens as a result of this. But I agree with Adrian's point earlier. I think it's up to the communities and the areas themselves to be innovative. I think Welsh Government can facilitate and allow you to do so, but I think the important thing is that people drive their own agendas and do things themselves. I think we need to look at local authorities going forward to maybe be relaxing some of their planning regulations in the short term to allow people to move fairly nimbly, because there is a challenge that in Wales we are rather notorious at being slow movers in some respects. So I think there's a challenge there, and I think there's a piece of work there for local authorities maybe to allow people a little bit of leeway in the short term to get things moving. But I think I'm trying to be as positive as possible, and I think there are opportunities for towns. I think, as I say, local government and Welsh government need to be facilitators to allow them to happen and try not to block things where they are on occasions with process. So I think, yes, I think, as I say, people aren't going to travel into the cities. That's to the detriment of the cities, unfortunately, but it's definitely a benefit there for towns. So if I leave it there, I'm interested to see what people have to say. So.
Great, thanks very much, Ian. And you've just given me a very lovely segue into the planning conversation that Roisin's going to pick up. Roisin, back to those two big initial questions in terms of key challenges and key challenges at the moment and the opportunities for the future, please.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I suppose one of the focusing on our immediate problems, being able to socialise in all its senses, not just about going to parties or going to the pub. And sustaining the economy, which we've heard about as well this morning, and supporting people directly are the big challenges facing us as a byproduct of this pandemic. So let alone the direct health issues. So social distancing can be a real issue when there are, at the current time, when there are people concentrated in specific areas, for example, where you want to go to exercise, parks, for example, or where the food outlets are. So it's really good to see at the moment the adaptation of street layouts taking place. For example, vehicle lanes taken out for use by pedestrians and cyclists. And I know of an example close to me, Roath Park Lake, really popular, real magnet for people exercising. And the council's put a one-way system around the lake to enable people to flow much better and permit social distancing much easier. So there's lots of really good innovation to deal with the current situation, which is great to see. We've heard about the use of public transport, and the use of that has been necessarily very low. But as we move out of lockdown and people start to move longer distances, the capacity on public transport will be an issue to accommodating social distancing. And this could do longer term damage of the willingness of people to use public transport post-pandemic. And I fully agree with Ian on that. And will a fear of set in people's minds? Would they prefer to be in the comfort of their own personal space in a private car? We really need, as a society overall, to resist that. We'd started to move much more towards the use of public transport, and there are very good reasons for that, including reduction of pollution, which is a cause of health problems in itself. Climate change, that has not gone away. And of course, personal physical activity, keeping us all active as well, really important. So there are many downsides to the lockdown. We mustn't lose sight of that. But I see that there are quite a few positives actually that have come from it or coming from it. So during the lockdown, people are necessarily focusing on their local areas, and that's had a positive perspective. Many people are busy running around. You know, I travel between different cities across the UK, but I'm able to focus on my local area. So really finding out about local business, what their offers are. And many local businesses have been really innovative, provide tailored customer services, particularly at the start when there were problems with flows of goods and perhaps panic buying. Local businesses were being really innovative in meeting that. Networks are developing more, and perhaps those existing were embedding. And I think we're all discovering nooks and crannies in our local areas and exploring what's on our doorstep. So that could be your local parks, local woodland, and they're really, really important. Travel distances for many have also reduced, and partly because of that and because there are fewer cars on the road, there's been a marked increase in walking and cycling. And that has real benefits in reducing pollution, increasing personal physical activity, and getting to know our local community, albeit at a distance. Faces becoming more familiar, and that's a sign of a strengthening community. So I'd like to say we must remember these positives and learn from them. But looking to the future, post-pandemic, think we need to seize those opportunities to rework how we operate for the long-term benefit, not return to old patterns and habits. If you like, we've had some cold turkey treatment, and we should take this pause to reset ourselves and think about our values for what we want from our towns. For the economy, take the opportunity to grow jobs which support our direction of travel, supporting green energy, energy reduction, which is really important, looking at that food production, and taking advantage of Wales's natural resources. What do we have that we can use? And I suppose thinking about homing jobs, I've heard this reference recently, the benefit of investing in local production rather than shipping things in from all across the world at such a high level. Now, as a planner, I'm going to say this: it's essential that we all have a plan to follow. We need a framework for government, all governments, so local governments and civic community, businesses, etc., to follow. They're important to coordinate policy and action. And as the Royal Town Planning Institute, we regard the National Development Framework, the NDF, as an essential missing part of this architecture at the moment. It can provide a national level, like spatial strategy, looking at those big issues, which other government plans can work from, come together spatially. So thinking about the spatial issues relating to energy generation, transport, digital infrastructure, all sorts of issues at that national level. The Welsh Government consulted on the NDF last year and have been working on reviewing it in the light of the responses to the consultation. And it had been due to be laid in the Senate in April, but due to COVID-19, it was necessarily delayed. But we would encourage the Welsh Government to bring that forward as soon as it's able to. And that could provide will provide a real direction for the recovery. We'd also encourage in South East Wales to work on the strategic development plan. That is really important because this is an area where there are many complex spatial interrelationships between areas, and it's very important that we tackle those. There are potentially ones for Swansea Bay and North Wales as well, but I think the South East Wales is very important because of those complex interrelationships. And of course, local development plans are really important at the local level, and we've heard a bit about that already this morning. Really important in coordinating activity on the ground on that. So that's the necessary spatial framework, but looking to towns and town centres, these traditionally are social places, the centre for trading, the centre for governance, even education, and towns and cities across Wales are at different scales. So if we think Cardiff, Treorchy, Carnarvon, Llandudno, Welshpool, Narberth as examples, they're all different. They perform different functions, local services, tourism, supporting rural industries, retail, shopping we've heard about as well. And they're also the central nodes for transport. So they allow people easy access, alternative forms of access to come into. And we need to ensure that doesn't become undermined by any shift to return to private car trips. So transport, how we move around, needs to be a focus to encouraging people back into centres and high streets as well. And Adrian mentioned earlier about the value that the key ingredients of why we go to places, why we go to towns, on top of the ease of access of getting into them, is does it have what we need, and do we have a good experience there? Is it attractive, well serviced, easy to use and to get around? So we need a good mix of offer, different shops, some big names, lots of independence. The services, let's think about those social, cultural, community facilities that we need. And this is where out of town shopping areas perhaps are weaker. They generally don't have a wide offer and tend to be car dominated in accessing. We've heard as well about online shopping really taking a hold at the current time. Will it completely take hold post-pandemic? Hopefully not. We still need areas for that community focus, for us to socialise and interact. So let's hope that towns can respond to attract people back. Towns and cities are also where most of us live, as Oriol mentioned at the start. And even post-pandemic, it wouldn't be right to rethink that. It's much more efficient way of providing services to communities. And I think the lockdown has really shown us how important our homes are. We need to have quality homes with access to gardens and green space. So let's not lose sight of that. And finally, in all of this, we need to remember we need to cater for all of our communities. We need to think about business needs, about young people, aging people, disabled people, visitors and local residents, and all different socioeconomic groups. We need to think about everyone. So our cities, towns and neighbourhoods are rich resources. And I hope we have learnt more about our local area, the physical and natural resources and communities over the past few months, and appreciate and value what's on our doorstep. So it's vital for Wales that we remember the positives of walking and cycling, less traffic on our streets, and the cleaner air that we've experienced in our towns and cities. And perhaps we can reset ourselves to continue with more of this. So I'll leave it there from the planner's perspective.
Great, thanks very much indeed, Roisin. Can I pick up on something that all three of you have mentioned? Obviously, our experience collectively has been that digital is the new essential tool for our future. We've all been relying for communicating, being in touch with our loved ones, but also for selling things if we're a business. We've been relying on that digital connectivity for weeks. So there are key priorities here for towns across Wales in terms of support. Adrian, you talked about digitising high streets, and a question's come in from Richard Leonard about that. What do you mean exactly? Because we don't want an either or, do we? We want a both and.
Yeah, for me, it's about successful towns act as a community. It's an ecosystem. But online, they all stand alone. They're all independent. Yeah. So we've been working with Vicky Mann from Nimi now for quite some time, and we've been developing an app which will act as one digital platform for all businesses in the town. So creating a digital community, a digital ecosystem. So a lot of people want to shop local, but they also they choose the convenience of online instead. Imagine being able to do both. Online, but you're getting it from local. So take, for example, Treorchy, Kirkcowell, Cowbridge, Narberth. It's not cost effective for each town to have their own digital solution. And you can't expect a visitor to download an app when they visit a town. But what if all towns have the same app? And it recognises where you are and becomes specific to that town. You could look at interactive shop windows through augmented reality. You could look at direct messaging and even a click and collect or a delivery service. You could look at then a town-based loyalty scheme, footfall data showing hotspots, customer behaviours and interaction. I mean, it's endless. Imagine a town doing a January sale as a town, instead of lots of individual businesses, and it could be get double points on your app this January.
So the power of the collective coming through. Have you seen that happening? And other good, because that sounds a great idea. Have you seen ideas that are kind of already happening in other places? You think, oh, I'm going to steal that with pride and let's make it happen here. What else can you share in terms of the good stuff?
It's not happening.
Okay.
Physically, the good stuff is happening, and I'd hang my hat on that the reason we become the champion high street in a very short amount of time was our partnerships and working together and being a community. But towns are almost one of the last places to be digitized, when technology has been used against towns for so long. It's so easy to buy online and get it remotely. It's easier to get it from China than from your high street because you haven't got to leave your house. We need to use that technology now. We've got, award-winning techs. We've got, award-winning high streets. Why can't we lead the way? I can, Silicon Valleys, there's a whole industry there. And like Ian said, we're very slow in Wales at reacting. And I think we need to learn from the floods and learn from COVID. And we've proven how we can respond quickly with minimal bureaucracy. Let's maintain that speed of response now and have a sense of urgency and be innovative.
So thank you for that. There's a comment in the chat from Liz Bickerton saying Cardigan's got a really good local app for doing some of what Adrian's talking about. Maybe Liz, you could share the name of that in the chat for everybody as well, and we can send that out with the notes afterwards. I think there's also something about, there's another question here from Alex still, which is to what extent, I'm just going to stick with you, Adrian, on this before we move on to other things and we come to travel next. To what extent do you think that digital engagement and innovation has benefited employers in Treorchy? Has this given it an advantage over other similarly sized Valleys towns?
Yeah, we've come together as we've launched a website, Visit Treorchy, so you can go to one place and you can do that. We've created group chats, so that independent business that was on their own at one point, especially during COVID now. So we've got about 90 businesses on a group chat that they're all putting their own questions in and helping. And has anyone got links to this? And what is furlough and how does it work? You're talking, young adults that have started their own business. They might be a very good florist or a very good butcher, but they haven't got the expertise and no one to lean on. So it's and I think it's again, digitizing is the way that we can supercharge the towns to come out of this.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that we've been talking about is how home working might increase, obviously, and that's possible for some people, and I suspect a lot of people on this call, obviously, for whom it is possible, but for many people it isn't. But in the longer term, people are still going to need social connections, in a point that Roisin, you made very articulately, both professionally and personally. And so the environment needs to change to deal with that. This is a question coming from Gareth Davis of Coastal Housing. How do you think that the external environment in town centres can be changed to benefit businesses? So we've heard a little bit about the additional walking and cycling zones. What about car-free spaces and things? Ian, that would have, potentially significant implications for some of the larger scale employers too. Can I come to you first and then Roisin on that question?
Yeah, it's interesting to see what employers are looking at the moment with respect to getting some of their workforce back to work. Only in relatively small numbers, but again, I think everybody's keen not to get everybody back in their car where possible. And I think, we're quite clearly seeing that the improvement on the environment of it are less people driving around at the moment. So, and they're looking at other solutions. And I think where practical, they're actually looking at their workforces and seeing where people work. And they're actually bringing people back that aren't reliant, one, on a car or two, on public transport in the first instance. That means that, going back to my point earlier, that more and more people that live outside of some of these big conurbations will be working from home for quite a long time. So I think this is, again, something we need to be thinking about. We're fortunate that a lot of the planning and a lot of the work that's been done already regarding the South Wales Metro will also help people as well with respect to getting to work. But I think we still have that challenge of getting people back onto public transport. And I'm not sure what the immediate answer to that is. But I think we need employers to be creative. And as a consequence of that'll enable us to avoid the rush to the car. And I think that would benefit us all in the short term, certainly, and even in the long term, because once people get used to doing things in a particular way, they're more comfortable doing it. I think what surprised a lot of people as well is that the technology's held up far better than people thought it would. And I think there was a general fear in the past that people didn't want to work from home because they weren't confident that the technology would hold up. But I think most people have been pleasantly surprised. I think there are some areas, probably in some towns, where it isn't great. And once we're out of this crisis, I think the focus needs to be on some of the areas that haven't benefited from a decent coverage. But I think, in truth, the more that can be done online, the better for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Roisin, can I come to you, please, particularly thinking about this external environment question?
Yes, I really support what Ian has just said about transport, etc., and that is really, really important. We mustn't lose focus on that. In terms of towns, how they can adapt, I mean, perhaps what we need is more spaces. I mean, coffee shops were becoming more popular for people to go into to have meetings, etc., and perhaps we need to facilitate that more. There are also examples of places like IndieCube, I think is an example, and there are undoubtedly others as well, with like hot desking facilities. So where people meetings can take place, or they're from out of town, perhaps they work from home in Treorchy and need to come into Cardiff for a meeting, but need a space for a couple of hours. Then those kind of places need to be perhaps facilitated within towns. So much more of that kind of facility, rather than sitting in a cafe where understandably you need to keep buying drinks and perhaps you don't want to keep having that. So having more flexible spaces, but then still work for the venue that you're in as well.
So that's interesting. So it reflects the conversation I was having with somebody yesterday about sort of hubs that are maybe relatively close to home, sort of within 20 minutes, that kind of place where you can meet with others, do your work as well, but also go back to home to carry on from whatever perspective. There's a good challenge on the questions from Nick Speed about, is there anything we can do to close our out of town shopping centres on the grounds that as a country of communities, we really need to protect our town centres? Ian, I'm going to come to you with that one, please.
Sadly, that might happen by default rather than through any planned process, because quite clearly at the moment, I think some of these large retailers are really suffering. So I think we will see some changes, and filling some of those empty spaces isn't going to be easy going forward. And I think, Llanelli is a great example of this, that, Park Trostre was lauded when it came about and was a real innovation, and it's had a horrific impact on the centre of Llanelli, and I think in future it comes back to Roisin's people, the planners, that maybe these aren't the solutions going forward. And I think I'd be really surprised if we see any further out of town shopping centres going forward. I think they're something of the past. And I think in truth, people won't be rushing to them. I do think people are shopping differently. I do think there's a challenge from the Amazons of this world. I appreciate that. It's desperately convenient. And I wish I could say honestly that I'd not used Amazon at all over the last 8 weeks. But sadly I have, and I'm sure a lot of people on the call have done so as well. But I think some of the stuff Adrian suggested earlier would really be good, to get towns working together and pulling together and offering ranges of products so you can shop locally. I accept somebody raised on the chat that this is probably a more expensive way of doing it, but we've got to decide for ourselves exactly what the price of not doing this is. And I think it's important that sometimes lowest price isn't always best value.
Absolutely. I think what we all value has been highlighted in all sorts of different ways, hasn't it, over the last 8 weeks? And certainly from a personal perspective and from my own, we are very, very definitely supporting local businesses above anything else. We had a question from Ian, who doesn't share his surname, but he's Ian S, about what are the kind of planning barriers in price that you're talking about. Could you explain what kinds of things that your CBI members have identified? Because obviously, there are challenges for local authorities at the moment, keeping the system working and dealing with the range of interests that are there. Can you be a little bit more specific about that for Ian?
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, we do seem to do things a lot slower in Wales. I'm not quite sure why that is. I think the fact we have 22 local authorities, so we have 20 different planning regimes, isn't always helpful either. When I talk to developers, I'm not just referring to the big developers here. There are some small indigenous Welsh developers that have the similar challenges. There's a lack of consistency. They may approach a development somewhere like RCT, and everything runs perfectly smoothly, and they're asked for particular criteria, and then they may go to another authority, and for no obvious reason, the other authority asks for entirely different criteria. And I think that sometimes causes confusion. I think it has a negative impact, and I think in some areas it stymies development. I think it's a big question, but I think for 3 million people, 22 local authorities is far too many. And I think if you add the national parks into it as well, I think you've got 25 different planning authorities. So that's, and they don't all approach things in the same way, which I don't think is helpful either. And I think as well, I think there are some challenges around Natural Resources Wales as well. And I think they haven't, as always, performed terribly quickly in some instances. I think where somebody mentioned the lagoon earlier, and I think you know, whatever your thoughts on the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon, they've been waiting 6 years for a marine license, and I think that's just insane.
So you've just highlighted one of the key issues around the complexity of decision making and governance arrangements in Wales, and lots of overlapping systems at different levels depending on what sector you're focusing on. So I'm wondering, and this is a nod to the rest of the IWA team, whether that might be a good topic for a future conversation in terms of, if not now, when. I'd like to come to issues of coastal communities, please. This question from Bryony Goodwin-Hawkins. So the idea that people will stay and spend locally is great, but how is this going to work for our coastal communities which are dependent on tourism? So, you know, we've seen lots of Visit Wales Later messaging going out, which I think is great, really simple, really clear. But for many places, you know, even for a town the size of Treorchy, local footfall is not going to be isn't going to be enough to sustain many businesses. Tourism, and particularly now where we're enjoying this fantastically amazing weather, is one thing. But what happens when we're going into the winter? We're going to end up having the equivalent of 3 winter seasons for our coastal communities. What can we do now to prevent that? Roisin, can I come to you first with that, please, and then Adrian?
It's a really, really valid point, but perhaps we won't need to jet off to lots of different places beyond Wales's borders, and we can come to our coastal towns and invest more. Holidaying in Wales is fantastic, and perhaps more people from Wales can holiday in Wales as well. And we do have good weather, actually. It's not just during the lockdown period. Yes, we have some bad weather as well, but actually you can have fantastic holidays in Wales. So we need to have a bit more of that going on. And I think as well, just for a holiday, you know, a 2-week holiday, it's fine to go further afield, but I think we just need to think about where we purchase our everyday things as well, where we access our services. And there is a lot more on our doorstep than perhaps we think about. Can I just take advantage of having the audience at the moment to come back on something Ian said about the planning and just address the issues there? Yes, there are differences across planning authorities, but we have to remember that the local context that they're working within as well. There can always be improvements on the systems and the processes and how planning committees work, for example, those kind of processes. But they do have to understand that people are working in different contexts. So what Snowdonia National Park needs can be quite different to Denbighshire County Council, for example, in terms of what they're responding to locally. And a really important part of this is about resourcing for public authorities. So whether that be Natural Resources Wales or the individual local planning authorities, and even parts of Welsh Government, they need to be properly resourced as well for them to be able to respond and to be innovative as well.
Thanks, Roisin. You've highlighted one of the things that has become a sort of repetitive mantra for us around the response needing to be intensely local in every different place, because it looks and feels very, very different. Adrian, could you tell us a little bit more about the conversations that are going on at the moment in terms of what the future could hold? And I know that Ian is very sorry he's had to leave us. He's chairing a call in 5 minutes, so thank you to Ian. For Treorchy, what does that intensely local positive future look like?
Well, just going off what you're saying, the earlier question, we're not a coastal town, no. But I'd agree that, you know, my day job, I'm a pub landlord, and no month is equal. So obviously we were open during January, February, they're the quiet periods, you know, and we're closed then while the sun is shining, and, you know, our busy periods we're closed. So we're very much hospitality and sort of tourism. We're in the same sort of boat as them. I agree with what Dr. Roisin says. I think people will choose to stay in Wales and in the UK for holiday. So hopefully short-term pain might be a little bit of long-term gain. And I think it's about taking opportunities. So Ian mentioned about out of default that maybe out of town department stores might sort of, take a step back. Well, they were one of the problems with the high street. They were part of that, and online shopping is, has sort of seen high street sort of shrink. So there's lots of opportunities with people staying local, people holidaying local. And Dr. Roisin mentioned about hot desking and things like that. I know lots of people that might live in the valleys, work in Cardiff, work in Newport and Swansea. They are looking for places now because maybe their home is not, they've got kids running about the place and dogs barking, and so maybe they can't have an office environment. So it's about, you mentioned earlier, cafes, bars, restaurants, even offices with empty spaces. We need to I think we need to diversify and just think out of the box. What can I do to fill my quiet times and my empty spaces? And I think a big part of that is, technology and being able to offer hot desking and remote working.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to start reflecting really on the conversation we've had so far. At the beginning, I talked about different changes that we've seen, things that have reacted to the situation, things that are still changing, that haven't settled anywhere yet, and then kind of perhaps more idealistic changes that we want to bring to light in the future. Roisin, what will you be taking away from this conversation in terms of the sticky changes? And I'm going to nab that from you, Adrian, in terms of the sticky high street. I love that. What in terms of the sticky changes that we want to keep, and what's your role at the RTPI in terms of making that happen?
Yeah, I really like the sticky street as well. That's a fantastic term. I think it is very much about the collaborative working, partnership working. Adrian mentioned that earlier, and the value of that, really strong. We need to look to communities and engage with communities. And certainly from a planning perspective, that is something which is really important, about involving local communities. And that isn't just the people that live there, that's the businesses. It's people in their different formats of so that real involvement, and that comes down, I suppose, to what the Future Generations Act is looking at doing. So involving people within a framework which enables long-term decisions to make. And I think as well, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that climate change is a really big threat to us all, and we need to carry on with that as well. So that is something that the RTPI is really campaigning about in terms of climate change, but community involvement and looking for long-term solutions to this.
Great, thanks very much indeed. How about you, Adrian? What sticks out for you in terms of this conversation, and what's your role in continuing to make Treorchy even more of a stickier street in future?
Yeah, but just to make you aware, I've trademarked the term sticky street, right? So,
fair enough.
Yeah. I think for me, it's reinforcing what I've been thinking and saying. I'm not an academic. I'm at the coalface. I got a small business. I help other small businesses, all voluntary. It's not my job. It's what I do as a community leader. But listening to what other people are saying, Ian and Dr. Roisin, there's not been one thing that I've disagreed with. It's all been reinforcing, and it's given me other ways of thinking about it as well. But we're all talking about the same thing, and we all agree on it. And these type of platforms and getting people together in a discussion is great. And it's networking. It's I might have had a problem that someone's got a solution to, which is on the call right now. So I think it's the fact that we all know what to do. The answers are there. We need to, I said about coming together as a community in your own town and other towns, but we need to come together as a Welsh community now and lead the way in how we develop high streets.
Thanks very much indeed. That's really useful. We're going to wind up now. We've got some great feedback on the chat room. Thanks very much indeed. But we're also interested to hear from you what kind of topics we should be looking at next. We want to hear from everybody. So if you are interested, we'll be sharing a link to a do poll, to a set of questions at the end, so you can help shape future sessions. Please do take 2 minutes to fill that in. Thank you very much indeed to Roisin and Adrian and to Ian for joining today's conversation. We've had Adrian Emmett from Treorchy Chamber of Trade, Ian Price from the CBI in Wales, and Dr. Roisin Willmott from the RTPI in Wales. If you want to receive early notifications of future IWA events and recording of all our brilliant Rethinking Wales sessions, please join us as a member at iwa.wales, about us and support us. Next week, we're going to be having a well-earned break, and Rethinking Wales will return on the 4th of June. Obviously, because we're not able to meet in person at the moment, one of the things that we are doing is leaving the chat room open now for about 15 more minutes for people on the call to be able to be in touch directly without the distraction of the panellists. And so we're going to say goodbye. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Have a very good afternoon.